You are listening to the Adapt Performance podcast, where we aim to make elite level strength and conditioning accessible to everybody. I'm your host, Jordan Webster, and let's get into the episode. Yes, guys, what is happening? Welcome to today's episode, and I'm going to cut straight to the chase. I put out a Q&A the other day on Instagram, and I said I'm going to answer a few on a podcast, and I got some really good questions, actually, so I'm going to save those, and that's going to be the next couple of topics. And today's one is, what are my top 3 overrated and underrated exercises for strength and size? Okay, so I think this is a really good one. I think it always divides the room a little bit, and it always kind of brings out a little bit of controversy, a little bit of conversation, and just kind of put this out there. We can disagree on this and still be really good friends. Like, I think there's a little bit of a misconception that all on social media people need to agree with everybody all the time. That's not the case, but I'm going to give you my thoughts on there. I'm going to put my thoughts out there, and I'm open to a little bit of scrutiny. Well, not too much scrutiny. Don't fucking annihilate me, but do let me know what you think. I want to know what yours are. So right, here we go then. A little bit of a disclaimer before some little worm starts on me about this. When we think about overrated or underrated, it is my opinion of somebody else's opinion, okay? So this is, when we think about this, I am making a judgment, an assumption on what people think, which might be wrong, it might be, right, it doesn't matter. But I'm making an assumption, and then I am deciding whether I think that their assumption is correct, or they're undercooking it, or they're overcooking it. So this is in no way near going to be like an accurate representation of what people think, potentially. Don't know, we'll see. And then when we get into the actual conversation of strength and size, like certain exercises can cause strength and size. But my argument is going to be around, they are not the best, okay? Doing a plank will help you with strength until it doesn't, So there's going to be so much context that you need to appreciate with all this, and there's going to be so much nuance. So I'm going to try and not sit on the fence as much as possible and actually just give you my thoughts, and we can chat a little bit about them, okay? So what I want to do is give you some basic principles, or, a little bit of a frame that I am going to look at this question through when it comes to strength and when it comes to size or hypertrophy. And I'm going to start off with hypertrophy, actually, because I think this is probably a little bit easier to be specific with. So when we think about hypertrophy, we are referring to the increase in muscle mass. So the increase in the cross-sectional area of the muscle, okay, getting jacked. When we look at the proposed mechanisms of hypertrophy, which do change all the time, and people are constantly disproving one of them and putting more weight in the other one, essentially what we boil it down to is 3 things. And it is mechanical tension, which is essentially how much tension that the muscle is producing. The closer to failure, the more muscle fibers and motor units that we are recruiting close to that failure point, we're going to get more hypertrophy, okay? We've then got metabolic stress, okay? So that is like the pump, the feeling of, when you've done a high rep set, or you've done multiple sets with reduced rest time working hard, and you get that burny feeling, and people say it's like lactate, but it's probably more hydrogen ions. Metabolic stress is, I suppose, one of those mechanisms. And then you've got muscle damage. So the feeling of ow, okay? I'm not going to explain that one too much. That one gets, to be fair, this one gets disproven, muscle damage, because, okay, you could go on a marathon run, you can go on a long run, and you can get sore muscles. Doesn't mean it was a really good stimulus for hypertrophy. And I would just look at muscle damage as a good proxy, okay? If you never get sore and your goal is to build muscle, that's probably an issue. If you get sore every single session and it's debilitating, that's also probably an issue, okay? So it's not the thing that we are going after, but if you never have any of it, that is probably, a sign of, okay, a lack of training intensity, or potentially, you are fully adapted to the stimulus that you are putting on to the body. And also, the other side of it is metabolic stress. So the pump feeling, the higher volume, that also gets disproven a little bit. Or I say disproven. Some people argue about it. For me, right, I'm going to give it a priority of, okay, I go after mechanical tension first. So I'm going to think about trying to get stronger through a full range of motion consistently over a long period of time, going close to muscle failure, okay? That's my number one priority. I'm then going to do a bit of pump stuff, okay? I'm going to get a pump. I'm going to feel amazing in a T-shirt, and then that T-shirt is going to fit me like dog shit 2 hours later when I absolutely shrivel. So I like to do a little bit of that stuff, because research always changes. I don't want to get 12 years down the line. I don't know why I said 12, but I don't want to get a certain amount of time down the line And then we're all like, oh, actually, metabolic stress was a really big driver of hypertrophy. And I'm like, oh, cool. So I just stopped all my sets at 5 for the last, 12 years. And now I've wasted all that time. I think it's just a good idea to do a bit of everything, training a variety of rep ranges. I just think that's the way, to be honest with you. It might not be super specific, but I'm not going to put all my eggs in the basket of science all the time. So that's hypertrophy, right? Okay, so let's review a few of the points there. We want to go through a good full range of motion with decent tempo. Okay, so decent eccentric control to make sure that the muscle is actually experiencing tension, a little bit of an isometric, in the lengthened position and the shortened position, but we're not taking the piss with it. We don't need to hold it for 10 seconds in each of those. And then we want a nice, solid, forceful, concentric muscle action where we're really trying to lift it explosively. Okay. We're also going to make sure that our exercises, if we're thinking about hypertrophy, are specific to the muscles that we are trying to train. Makes sense. Okay. If you're doing bicep curls, you want to improve your bicep size. Okay. If you're doing calf raises, it wants to be calf. Okay. It makes sense. So we want to be very specific in what we're actually trying to change. We then want to lift close to muscular failure, and generally speaking, between a 5 and a 35 rep max. Okay. So you've got a big range there. So we're talking realistically, I don't know what a 35 rep max is in terms of percent of 1 rep max, but you're probably talking a 5 rep max being 85% ish, let's say, all the way to 60. Okay, so you could probably get good muscle gains in that time frame. You want to make sure that you are consistently overloading. Okay, the way that we are going to try and get bigger over time is you consistently need to, give the body more of a stimulus, so it needs to adapt more. We want to start to consider something that Dr. Mike Israetel speaks about from Renaissance periodization, which is the stimulus to fatigue ratio. Okay, so certain exercises will pack a certain amount of stimulus, a certain amount of, okay, the body needs to adapt to this thing. Okay, it's the stress we put on it. However, how much fatigue does it give in relation to that thing? Okay, so let's think about an example of, 10 reps on a deadlift, okay? A 10 rep max, okay? There's probably a shitload of stimulus there, okay? Through the upper back, the glutes, the hamstrings, the lower back, the forearms from gripping. However, if you've ever done like rep max on a deadlift, particularly high, like there is a lot of fatigue that gets built up there, okay? So now you've got this kind of equation where, okay, there's a lot of stimulus, but there's also a lot of fatigue, okay? Well, if we flip that coin a little bit, if we think about some of the exercises for, the glutes that can provide a lot of stimulus, but don't give you as much fatigue, like a hip thrust, for example. And that's probably a really bad example, but you get what I mean there. Like you can pick specific exercises that give you a load of stimulus, but don't particularly give you the fatigue, which means you can train harder more often. Okay. You can attack that muscle group in a couple of days or, a lot sooner than a 10 rep max deadlift would potentially. Okay. It's not, What is going on, guys? Quick break in today's episode for me to ask you for a favor. If you enjoy these episodes, please do share them with a friend, okay? We don't run any paid ads on this type of podcast, so it's all organic, okay? So the more you can share it with an individual or put it on social media, it really, really helps. So if you could do that for me, I'd massively appreciate it. And let's get back into the episode. I really like the idea of that, to be honest with you, because I think as my body's getting older, as a 30-year-old, there are certain exercises where I'm like, you know what? I know that's probably a really good way of going about things. However, I just don't think that it giving me more elbow pain or knee pain really kind of is worth me training that specific muscle. Okay. And that's another way to think about it. Are you actually getting muscle adaptation? Are you getting a sensation through the muscles, or is it, okay, my back's killing? Okay. So yeah. Stimulus to fatigue ratio, and then we've got volume. Okay, so you want to accumulate a decent amount of volume. I don't think people are very specific, and I don't think we really know what the total amount of volume that somebody can cope with is, and it's different for every person. It'll probably be different at different periods during your life. I think when you're younger and testosterone's going through the roof, you can probably handle more. If you're in a calorie surplus, you can handle more. If you're sleeping well and your total, daily stress is relatively low, you can probably handle more. But it does change all the time. But that's one of the things you need to consider is the total amount of volume. And this kind of goes, if we look at different bodybuilders throughout the ages, and this, we'll get to this in a second. Like, there are people that have got into amazing, fucking hell. I sounded like Goldmember from Austin Powers. Amazing, smoking a pancake. Have got into amazing shape, doing different like training methods. Some people go for higher volume, lower intensity. Then you've got like Mike Mentors of the world that go with super high intensity, like 1 or 2 sets to failure, and don't really touch any accessory work. Okay, so there's variety there. We do not know the right answer. However, what we do want to do, if we're thinking about hypertrophy, is look at what the best in the world do. Okay, look at the biggest guys in the world, and you'll probably have some clues. So that's a little bit of like the frame that I am going to look at this question through when it comes to hypertrophy. And let's just kind of look at the other side of this coin then, and look at strength. When we think about strength and we are talking about, okay, how much force can we produce? How much force can we produce? We want to think about specificity here. Okay, so what is the muscle action that we are trying to be strong in? Is it isometric, eccentric, concentric? What is the range of motion that we are trying to be strong in? Okay, is it powerlifting depth squats? Is it we want to be super strong for a strong man picking up a yoke? Okay, because the range of motion is a lot shorter there. Therefore, okay, which one is the correct definition of strength? We want to think about coordination. Okay, if we think about some of the different ways you can test somebody's strength, one rep max or a rep max test of a certain exercise is a good way of doing it. But there is always a coordination factor there that we need to consider. If you are somebody that has access to force plates and higher tech, then the way that you guys will test for maximal strength is going to be some isometric mid-thigh pulls. It might be some isometrics in certain positions, which gives you a really good, ballpark. Well, actually, probably a really accurate measure of strength for that specific range of motion. Okay, and it gives you a good global strength measure of that person. So coordination and technique definitely matters. And then if we're thinking about strength as well, we also need to consider the idea of stability. Okay, the more unstable an exercise, potentially the worse it's going to be for strength, producing the most amount of force. And the idea, or the phrase that people use is, you can't shoot a cannon from a canoe. The idea, if you're on an unstable surface, you're probably not going to be able to recruit the most amount of motor units, which ties into hypertrophy as well, actually. So that's strength and it's hypertrophy, the ability for the brain to sense that, okay, we are in a situation where we can just push. So yeah, there's some things there. So the specificity of the type of strength that we are trying to get strong at. Okay, and it does depend. Okay, sorry to be that guy, but we want to be able to overload it, and we're talking about high percentages of 1 rep max, so 80 to 85% and above of your 1 rep max. Essentially, we don't always know the rep maxes of exercises, so we just want to lift heavy. To be honest with you, and I think what I say, 80% of your 1 rep max is probably like an 8 rep max. So if you don't know your 1 rep max, just do a heavy set of 8, and you don't really want to leave many reps in the tank, and you are probably really going after strength. We spoke a little bit about technique. Okay. If we're thinking about what the best exercise is to train for strength, technique has got to be a factor. Some people can get an amazingly strong legs from doing a back squat because their technique and their proportions are really built for it. Some people do not get an amazing strength stimulus from a squat because potentially mobility restrictions, limb lengths, technique-wise, they just good morning it, which means they don't get the most out of, quads or whatever. So something to factor in. And then we've got frequency. How often can you actually attack that exercise in order to actually get a stimulus that is worth us getting stronger through? So all that ramble to say, strong for what? Okay, when we're thinking about getting stronger, we need to think strong for what? Okay, so right, let's get into the meat and veg of it then. What are going to be my overrated and underrated exercises? And hopefully I'm not going to piss people off. And if you're getting pissed off by an exercise choice, then that's on you guys. However, so my number one overrated exercise for strength and hypertrophy is carries. Okay, and it's kind of done like a little bit of a 360 in the world, actually. I think it almost seems popular to hate on carries. And I don't hate on carries. I just think I'm not 100% sure on what we really get out of it. Okay. And when I think about carries, that is such a big, that could be a farmer's carry, that could be a Zercher carry, that could be an overhead carry, it could be a yoke carry, it could be a Conan's carry, a keg. Like there are so many different overhead. I've already said overhead, but they are totally different things. Okay, if you go overhead, okay, that's really going to be like a muscular endurance or stability challenge or strength challenge for the shoulders. Okay, in which case the glutes, the quads, the hamstrings, the calves, they're probably not going to take a bit of a battering. If you're doing yoke, okay, so if you haven't seen a yoke before, it's a strongman piece of equipment where you load up super heavy. It's like a bar on your back and it's dangling. And you usually do it in distances of like 10 to 20 meters in strongman comps where you can load up super heavy. Okay. So for me, right, this is, I'm putting this down here as somebody that competed in strongman for 3 or 4 years. Like that was my sport. It was what I trained towards. And like I put in a lot of time on them. So like farmers carry wise, I think I got to, I can't remember. I think it was either 127 kilo per hand or 137 kilo per hand. Okay. People that are listening to this that are strongmen may just be like, you did not lift that. I can't remember what it was. It was in that ballpark. So you're talking heavy weights, okay, with farmers handles, and you go for 10 meters, 20 meters, whatever. The limiting factor in that exercise is grip. It is grip, and it is your hands every single day of the week. Okay. So what is it training? Like, what is the thing that is going to muscular failure in that exercise? It's the grip, and it's the hand flexors. Okay. So it's an amazing grip strength exercise, but I don't know what else it's really giving you. Okay. It's going to make you globally strong at carrying something. Okay. You don't go through a super full range of motion. You know, you're not really taking any exercise to any muscle to length other than potentially traps. Okay. I think the traps grow quite a bit because you've got this a fuck ton of muscular tension and you've got long muscle length. So I think that is a really strong stimulus for growth. Well, yeah, so I don't know what we're training with it. And I think also when I think about yoke as well, like I think I got to 200, and I'm probably butchering this again. I think I got to 200, I'm going to say 50 to 70 kilo, 10 meter walk. Okay, I felt like I'd lost about 6 inches in my height. So I went down to a solid 5'1". I'm joking. So there is a lot of fatigue there. There is a lot of fatigue there from handling that. You cannot do that too often. You can only really do that in certain blocks of training where you're really hammering it before you need to take time off and rotate and rebuild. So I don't know. I think it's going to get you strong at that specific thing, but I don't know what we get from it, you know. And if we start thinking about like suitcase carriers and we start thinking about farmers, how do we coach it? Like, I don't know what the universal thing is that we are looking to achieve with that thing. Like, are we wanting people to walk exactly as they walked before? Or are we do we want to feed into a little bit of like dysfunction with a little bit of lateral flexion on a suitcase carry? I don't know. Okay. I just don't know what it gives us. And a lot of people love it. Like, there's a lot of like really smart guys that love this as a strength and a hypertrophy exercise. So Christian Tiabodu, who's a lot does T Nation and all that type of thing. He's a big fan of them. I just don't get that. Okay, but question me on it. Like, genuinely help me to understand your thought process if you are somebody that loves them. But I think stimulus to fatigue ratio, it doesn't give us what we want. In a lot of cases. Okay. So that's my number one. Okay. That's my most overrated exercise. I suppose it's classification of exercise. We're then going to go on to number 2. Okay. Which is kettlebells. Okay. So it's not a specific exercise, but it is a classification or a group of exercise methodologies, I guess you could say. So if we're thinking about size and strength, okay, we want to be able to overload it specifically. We really want to try and increase the ability for the muscle to produce force. I just don't think kettlebells really put you in a great situation to do that. They are big, they are awkward. A lot of gyms don't have anything nearly heavy enough to actually stimulate, you know, muscular strength for most of us. You know, I think you go to a pure gym, it maxes out at 20 kilo. And if they did have the heavier kettlebell, it goes up to a 24. So now you've increased by 4 kilo. Might be fine for lower body exercises, but when it gets to upper body exercises and pressing and pulling, a 4 kilo jump isn't always ideal. I think, I just think it's big, it's awkward. The loading potential of it isn't always amazing. I think you can be specific, like you can change the exercise to determine what you want to get out of it. People usually do kettlebells for super high rep stuff anyway, and they play around with different loading like loading prescriptions of doing like pyramids, and they'll do long supersets and circuits with it, which is cool. Okay, you will get stronger and you will get more muscle size from it, but is it the best thing for those objectives? I do not think so. And also, like, I don't know what have we got in the gym? I think we've got a 60 kilo, might be bigger. I think we've got a 60 kilo kettlebell at the gym I used to train at, and it is ginormous. Like, honestly, like gripping onto the actual handle is like grabbing a Coke can. And guess what the limiting factor there is? Me being able to do, swings with it is grip every single day of the week. So then my glutes are not getting a hammer in, and potentially you could say it's not the right exercise. I just think it's not the right tool for these objectives. Okay. But saying that, okay, there are a lot of scenarios where a kettlebell is a really good tool. And I think the exercise I use the most for kettlebells is bottoms up kettlebell overhead press for shoulder stability, mechanics, generally getting the rotator cuff working nice. I do use it for swings, but not loads. Yeah, there it is. Cool. That's my answer. That's number 2. Number 3 then is getting into banded exercises. I said this on a few podcasts ago. Like, I went through a phase of doing Westside Barbell programming, so conjugate, where I would experiment with different exercises often. Okay, there was a lot of exercise variation: bands, chains, deficit, pulling from a higher height, squatting to a box. I tried it all. And, we could argue that I didn't try it for long enough. I did it for like a year and a half, I think, or a year, something like that. I did it for a decent amount of time. We could argue I didn't do it for long enough to really revisit all those exercises to see an improvement. But I just think if we think about size and strength, okay, if we think about muscle size, we want, to have decent amount of load in a stretched muscle position. Bands don't allow that because it gets heavier towards the top of the range of motion. So it overloads the shortened length of the muscle, not the lengthened. So I don't think that's appropriate. So I think you're probably just causing more fatigue than you are getting stimulus from that thing. For a strength perspective, do I think it's the best? I think it could be useful. I think it could be useful for both. But do I think it's the best? No. I think it's faff, if I'm honest with you. I think it's a pain in the ass a lot of the time to set them up and get it to the right tension you want. And a lot of people are going to start to fail the exercise around halfway of the movement, okay? So I don't think the bands jump in at the right time to really kind of challenge that thing. I know when you have let's say you're doing a banded squat and you've got it hooked to the bottom, you need to accelerate out of that bottom position, knowing that you've got to blast through that sticking point that you have, and then it starts to go through. So I don't know. I see it. I go back and forth with bands and I don't have solid answers with it. All I can say is from a very pragmatic or practical standpoint, I think they're a ball ache, to be honest with you. And yeah, I'm not sold on that idea. Yeah, I think that's all I really want to say. I just don't think they're great tools for that thing. Okay. And we could put bands into, if we think about like band pull aparts and banded face pulls, and we can think about banded pull ups, all those types of things. Generally speaking, because when you stretch the band, it gets, there's tension on the muscle at a certain range of motion, but it means that it is unloaded through a different range of motion. Okay. So think about a band pull apart. Okay. I really like them. Okay. I like them for a slightly different reason, and banded face pulls, different reason, but you're going to get loads of tension in the shortened position and you're going to get fuck all when the muscle is lengthened. Okay. So that's probably not great for strength, and it's probably not great for hypertrophy either. I do think it's quite nice to get some blood flow in there and a little bit of activation if you are doing something slightly different. Triple H, he was one of my favorite wrestlers. If there's any like he was back in WWF days, which that is definitely why I'm 30. he was one of my favorite wrestlers, Triple H, and he used to train with a guy called Joe DeFranco. And they said that the reason he had such a shredded back was through like doing millions and millions of band pull aparts. And that probably just stuck with me for a long time. I just quite like them from a psychological standpoint of just having a little bit extra work through the upper back, rear delts, that type of thing. But we cannot disregard the fact that there's probably a lot of junk volume in there, meaning that, you probably are not getting a load of actual stimulus. You're probably just getting a lot of reps that cause fatigue. Who knows? Okay. Right. So that's my 3 before I fucking go off on another side tangent. I used to think that, this is when I was like super young, probably like 7 or 8 or whatever. I used to think that Triple H was my granddad because they look quite similar. Like my granddad was a silver fox and yeah. Right then. So they're my overrated. We're then going to go into underrated. So I just think people do not put enough worth in a Romanian deadlift, specifically with a barbell, specifically using deadlift straps. So the grip is not a limiting factor. I just think it's a great trap, upper back, lower back, hamstring and glute builder. And lats, like you're going to get strong lats from this as well, and potentially a decent amount of hypertrophy. So I don't think people weight them enough. Okay. I think let's set you a target, right? I give you a year to try and like get to 200 kilo on a Romanian deadlift. And it is not the specific number that is going to like mean that you have got a big back, glutes and hamstrings, but it's the training to get to that point where you're going to have to be progressive. You're going to have to get your technique amazing. You're going to have to go through, certain phases where you work through a full continuum of reps of slightly higher volume, progressing through to lower volume. I just love it. I also like doing a pause with it, specifically in the bottom position. Okay, so now we're going to get more hypertrophy through the glutes, the hamstrings. Really challenges the upper back, so your trap's going to be absolutely ginormous. I'm just a big fan of those as an exercise, to be honest with you. I think they get tricky when you're really trying to push them heavy in season if you're playing a sport. Because they can give you sore hamstrings, but that usually comes from you not being prepared for the actual exercise. So I think if you smash it in the off season, get really, really good at them, you can reduce it down to a really, safe maintenance dose of them. And they won't make you super sore, but they will keep some really good strength. And that is protective strength if you're going to be sprinting in you. I think a few tips on them is, definitely use deadlift straps. I personally like to go barefoot. Keep my socks on. I'm not going to fully free the beasts, but I do think having a better connection to the ground is a really good thing. I also think if you get backache or you get a back pump, it probably means that you are trying to protect the back a bit too much in the way that you're really forcing yourself into extension. You've got like a big lower back arch, and that just means the erectors are going to be gripping on for dear life. So what I want you to think about is just pulling your shoulders down towards your hips, okay, when you've got the bar in your hands. That's going to get your lats on. I then want you to think about you're going to take a punch in the stomach. So I need you to brace and squeeze nice and tight to the abs so that you've got shoulders down, brace the abs, and then think about shoulder blades back and down, okay? But without losing those previous 2 points. And usually that just puts you in a better stacked position to really benefit from the exercise. Okay, so that's my first underrated. I think you need to absolutely get after it when it comes to a Romanian deadlift. Treat it as a main exercise. Second one is, I'm cheating here a little bit, but I'm going to go with it anyway, is machines. I'm just a big fan of machines. I think it gives you an ability to really overload the specific muscle and get super strong on a specific muscle or group of muscles without anything else being the limiting factor. Okay, if we think about a leg press versus a squat, I know, the squat being the king of lower body exercises, of course, we all value it. But if we're trying to accumulate a good amount of lower body volume, and get a decent amount of load through the legs, a decent amount of volume through the legs to really push for hypertrophy or strength, leg press or a different kind of lower body machine is probably going to be the way. If we think about stimulus to fatigue, there's only so many sets and reps and days per week you can do a squat before something else starts to creep up, whether that is just a general sense of fatigue, where you just feel super compressed, a lot of axial loading, Potentially your knees start to give you some shit. Like, I'm not saying squats are bad. I love a squat. I'm a big fan of a squat, and it's probably one of my favorite exercises to do. However, I do just love a machine across the board. I think it just gives you an ability to be a sniper with your prescription. Okay, you can be like, right, I really want to change this specific muscle. I want to really kind of dig into making that muscle the best it can be. Machines are super stable, which is going to be great for motor unit recruitment. You can overload them really well. They're safe, so you can really get close to you can really get close to failure, which is going to be super important for both of those goals. You can go heavy. Yeah, I'm just a fan, to be honest with you. And I think machines are so bloody versatile. You know, like, if you can find a really good machine that you connect well with, it doesn't make your elbows hurt. It doesn't make your knees hurt. Okay, you're not being forced into a position that the barbell is putting you in. Yeah, I just love a machine, to be honest with you, and I think they give us a lot of great things from an athletic population standpoint. You know, and I think when using them with fighters as well, is you can be specific. That's it. You don't need to go down the route of, okay, it's a great bang for your buck, because what bang for your buck basically means is, okay, you train a lot of muscles. Okay, but when you train a lot of muscles, what are you training the best? Probably one thing, and the rest of it is just coming along for the ride and getting tired. Okay, if you're training twice a week, then yeah, I would go for bang for your buck exercises most of the time, because you really want to try and create a full body protective effect through, you know, some load, some tension, and in general movement. We haven't spoke about movement there. Like, I love barbell exercises and non-machine exercises for improving movement skills and everything like that. But we're speaking specifically about, you know, the physiology. So machines, big fan. And then I also just love a pull-up. So that's my number 3. Yeah, I just really enjoy a pull-up. Like, I don't think people go after it enough. I think get to a point where you can do half of your body weight on a 1 rep max pull-up, and you will have a humongous set of arms, a humongous back, and you will have some amazing relative strength. It's going to take you a long time to get there. And some of the things that I've found really matters is actually finding a grip width or a set of handles that you really like and feels nice on your shoulders and your elbows and your wrists. I know some people that really can't agree with a straight bar, whereas they can turn their hands in slightly, you know, so you go kind of semi-pronated, you know, kind of shifting a little bit closer to neutral. And that is just a game changer for them. So yeah, I think pull-ups, big fan. I can't do them very well at the minute because I've got a bit of a naff shoulder, but that's one of the things. When I get back to being able to smash it, my PB on a chin up is 52.5 kilo, and I'd love to get to a 60. I'd love to get to a 60, which would be like 66% of body weight. That's what I'm kind of aiming for. So a pull up is probably, this differs, you know, everyone's a little bit different. Most people are stronger on a chin up than a pull up. But I would imagine, I think my pull-up was around 45 kilos, so it's probably dropped off like 10%. But yeah, so I think pull-ups is one of the things I would look to get good at. Just mastery. And you can always find a beam. You can find a bloody park that has pull-up bars or monkey bars. And I just think, yeah, just a solid fan there. Right then, so there it is. Just give you a quick recap on everything we went through there. Some kind of principles and some general thoughts around how you get strong, how you improve cross-sectional area or muscle hypertrophy. A little bit of context needed when you approach this question. I then gave you my 3 most overrated exercises, and I definitely cheated, but carries, kettlebells, and bands. Okay, they're more classifications and specific exercises. And then underrated, I went with Romanian deadlift, specifically paused. I'm just a big fan. Machines, okay, resistance machines are just amazing. And then we have got pull-ups, okay. Yeah, just really like them. Just think people should do more of them. I think you'd get a lot from it. Okay, sweet. So that is the end of the episode, guys. If you are an athlete or a coach that is looking for elite level strength and conditioning, then give us a shout and we will have a little chat to you about it. Make sure that you are a good fit for our programs and our coaching, and just to make sure that, you know, we are not misaligned. And that's super important when it comes to coaching for us. So we will do a stellar job of making sure you are the right guy and we are the right guys or girls. Okay, sweet. Right. have a good week, guys, and I will speak to you next week. Okay, that is the end of today's episode, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, please do let us know and then share it with somebody who may find this episode interesting. Okay, see you next time. Cheers.